So hi everybody and welcome back to the C++ tutorial series for absolute beginners. This is video 176 and in this video we are talking about the keyword const again, but const with functions in classes. And let's get started. So here we can see this is again my class, which is in my namespace house, but my class has only one function, which is a non-const function. So we can see it's a normal function which has not the keyword const, and we have to create a const function to work with. So let's create a const function. Let's make it very simple. I call it void const function. And when we create a const function, then we use the word const after this round brackets. Of course, we can use the const keyword here in front too, but careful. Here in front, it means something different. It is referring to the return type, and in this case, it is not as a return type of void. There make it no sense. But if you have another return type, then it's another story. So careful about where you put the const. If you put the const here behind the function, it means you are referring to the function body, which means when I add here the body now, you can't change variables within this class. So you see here on top, I have this house name, string house name. Let's take this house name here. Let's copy this one and let's try to change it here. For example, I want to assign it a new name, for example, new name. And you see already the compiler is complaining. And when I hover my mouse over it, the compiler says, because this class is const, it is not allowed. If I remove this const, you can see, then I'm allowed to change this house name. And that's a very important note here. And we need to know this. So, all right, this const class is not allowed to change variables, but of course we can use variables. What I mean with use is you can, for example, print out this house name. I cannot change the value of the house name, but I can print out the house name. Let's print it out. For example, I print out const, let's write here, const functions can use variables. And here I print out the house name. Let's make here this one, house name. And we have here the house name. All right. So now I created a const variable and here is my text. And here you see the compiler is no complaining when I just use the variable. So that we know already about const, I think. And now we have a const function in our class, and here I have a non-const function in our class as well. So now we have to use them and test them and see what's the difference between that and and see what's the difference. So to see that, we have to create again a variable just for a class. My class is big house, which is in my name house. So let's create this one, a variable, just normal. House is my namespace. Big house is my class, which is now my type. This is my type. And I create a normal variable name. And my variable name is, for example, coders house. And I use here the delegate function constructor. Here are the constructors. I use this constructor, and we know constructor means all time the same class name is also the constructor's name. And this one is a delegate, we know, because here it is using again the same class name and calling it here. So I use this one. So I have just to provide a string name here. Okay, coders house. Let's write here a string name for the house is coders. Very simple. All right, so far it's all simple and straightforward. And you can see this is just a normal variable now. The only difference is I'm using my own class, and this is not a const variable. We talked already about const variables and non-const variables. How to make this normal variable to a const variable. We already learned this in the last video and in other videos as well. We can put const keyword here in front, or we can put it here as well. After this is considered to be the same. So you can put it here or here. It's to be considered the same. So let's put it here for this purpose. And yeah, now I created a const variable, which is Coda's house. And we know a const variable means if this object is created, we are not allowed to change any of these variables anymore in this class. That's why we make it const. That's the reason why I use this const keyword here. If I want to change any variables here in this class, I would not use this word const. So that's also very important. So when you create a variable with a class and you say const, you don't want allowed to change anything in this object here, in this variable, in this object what you're creating. All right, let's test this if this is true. I use now this variable name, this object name, you can call it as well, Coder's house. And now I use this dot sign to access the class. We learned this, and you can see here we have 4 variables. Are there 4 variables? Yes, there are. There are 4 variables, and we have here 2 functions which are public. And when we watch this again, here is something strange. Wait again. When I watch here the public functions, and you can see the symbol here indicates functions, there is only one public function, and it is this const function. So I can see this function here. I can call this const function with a const variable, but I can't call this non-const function with a const variable. Why? Why I can't do this? And there is a very, very simple reason. The reason is, like I said, if you create a const variable, you say to the compiler, don't allow anyone to change this class which I'm going to create here. And that's the reason why you are not allowed to call a non-const function, because we know a non-const function here, like this print house name, he is allowed to change variable names, right? For example, I have here this house name, and here I assign it just a new name, which means if my const variable here would be able to call this non-const function, I would be able to change a variable which I don't want it, because that's why I made the variable const. I said, no, I don't want that. You are not able to change it, because if I want that you are able to change anything, then I would not use this const word. Then I would just make a normal variable. Now you can change what you want. I don't care. But that's very important note here that you understand this. When you see anything like const, it means don't change it. Please don't change it. And okay, now we get it, and now we understand also why the compiler gives us only access to this const function. The question is here, okay, I understand it. I have no access to this non-const function, but why I have access to this const function? And the reason is very simple. This const function here is not allowed to change anything. For example, if I copy this one here down, you can see, because it's a const function here, the compiler is already complaining. You are not allowed. It's a const function. The body of a const function is not allowed to change anything. You can use it like we did here, but you are not allowed to change it. All right. So this, I hope you understand it. And this is the trick with this const function, and that's very important to note here. All right. So I can call this const function. Let's test it if this is working first. Perhaps it's not working, but we can see here const function can use variables, coders. This is this what I called here. This is this const function, and const functions can use variables, and here I provided this house name coders. All right. So I hope you understand this so far, because I want to make here fast one more example, which is the same like here without the const. But wait a minute, we are talking about const, and now I'm talking about a normal variable. Yes, because I want to show you something with normal variables. Okay, let's make here another variable. This time I call it Maggie's house, and let's call this Maggie. And you see the same thing like here, only the difference is I use not this word const, which means in this case, I'm allowed to change all variables, and it behaves a little bit different than this const here. And what it is the different part? Let's watch this. So Maggie's house. I use again the access specifier, and you can see the only difference is here I'm allowed to call any function, const function and the normal function. And it makes also sense because the const function means gives you only a guarantee that you can't change anything. But a normal variable is allowed to change or not to change. So that's okay. If I can't change it, if I use a const function, then I don't change it, but I can call it. And I can call also a function which can change any variables, because that's why I made this house, Maggie's house, for example, without the word const, because I want change variables in this class. And this is the only real difference about this const variables and this const functions. You can call with a, for example, I can call now this print house here. You can call with a non-const variable all. Here I can call now this one. This is the first one here. And here I'm going to change the name. Normally I have Maggie here, right? I call here, I give it the name Maggie, but I change here the house name as well. And you see what happens. And here Maggie is changed to no const Smith. House name Smith. Here I changed the Smith, and then I printed this out, no const, and the house name of Maggie becomes Smith because I changed it. Because here a normal variable without a const is allowed, and a normal variable can call all functions in a class. And that is the rule that you have to learn here. If you are creating a const variable, or if you see in code anything which has a word const, they cannot call all functions, even if they are public. You see, this is public. You are only allowed to call const public functions. You are not allowed to call non-const public functions. That's very important. And the question is, why is this so important to know? It's very easy actually to understand, but why is this so important to know? Because I told you in one of my last videos, when we talk about functions, and not necessarily about class functions, so functions in general, let's make here a general function, for example, a void, or not void, let's make it a house function with a return type, house. My function is now, I make a function with a return type big house, and I call this function returns checking house. Let's call it great house. Let's call it great house, and we give it a parameter, of course, big. Let's make it house and big house again. I give it a parameter of my class here, and I call it just house para. Oops. House para, something like that. And then you can see this is just a normal function. This is not in a class. Here I'm out of a class. I'm out also of a namespace. So here's a just normal function. But when I talked about classes and functions in one of my other videos, I said many programmers will never use it this way, which I'm showing you here. Almost, you will not see it very less. You will see it sometimes there and like here in demonstration, but most time you will see it not in this form. What I mean with that, not in this form? Because I said these parameters here, especially this custom classes here, they can be very big, and almost all programmers will try to avoid to use a copy, because this one here will create a copy of this parameter, which is of the argument which is passed here. And they won't avoid this because that will reduce size, and they will reduce performance and all this kind of stuff. They avoid it. And how they avoid it, I showed you this all time. They are using this reference symbol because they make just a reference instead of copy. They say, okay, we just get a reference, which means the caller's location itself. We don't create anything. And of course, most time they want only use use this class, not change anything. And when they use a function like that, they won't just use it. And to prevent this one, they write here const. So this const here make it that this reference is now a const reference, which means they can call it as a const as a const version of this reference. And a const reference means all the class is considered to be const, and you can call only const functions here. So in this kind, of course, this is a function here. It's not here. You will probably not able to call any functions here because it's not allowed to call other functions in this one. But what you this is very important here to understand that they are doing this almost all time. For example, if you have now this house param, let's make it house param. Is this one? Yes, this house param. And let's say you want call. You can see here now you have only access to this const function here because they want to be sure. Okay, this is const, you are only allowed not to change it. But when I get rid of this const here, look what happens then. And this is the thing what we have to learn as well in training. Here, the problem here is you are able to change now the function. And that's they don't want most time. They want to avoid this because now you could call this print out house name. And with this one here, you are changing actually this argument, which means, for example, if I call this house here, let's call this function here. I copy this one here. Here in my main, I call it, and I call it with for example, I call it with Maggie's house, and Maggie is here at this point. Let's delete this one here for a moment. So I created this variable Maggie's house. Maggie's house name is Maggie. And if I put now Maggie's house as a variable here, because this is the argument which I have to pass in. And let's do this. And now the problem is here. This function here, what I have here is changing the thing of Maggie's house here. Let's print it out and see if this is true. We see there is an error. All right, of course, I have to return here a value. Let's return it. Because I made here a return value. Yeah, that's bad. Oh. Let's change this return value. It's absolute not necessarily here because we don't need that. We'll make it a void. Just make a void. So now it's okay. I want to show you just that we can change this house name and this return value. It's not so important. That was just to show you that I want to show you that we can put also const later there, but let's skip this part. So here the function again, just without a return type, so I don't have to use this return value. But what I want to show you is we have not a const here in this parameter, and this can cause problems now. And you can see, where is this? No const Smith here. And this is this, I think that was, let's get rid of this one perhaps, so that it makes a little bit more easy to see what we have. All right, one more time. Here Maggie is created and then no const Smith, so it is changed. You can see this one here. No const, and then here house Smith it's called, and it is changed. And what I want to point out is many programmers don't want this, because most time they just want, like I said, they want just a copy, and that's why they write const. And this kind of stuff you already know, and you can see now I have here an arrow. You are not allowed to do this because it's const. And this one will change the value of this argument. This is not allowed, but of course you can look this. You can still call a const function. And that's very important to know. You can't call non-const functions, but you still can call const functions because, like I explained to you before, these const functions will not change anything in this variables here. This is a guarantee, right? And that's very important to know, because why is this also important to know? Because, and now comes the big point, when you create a class like this one, you have to consider that the most programmers and yourself as well will create in future many functions like this. And when you create many functions like this, you have to consider to create many const functions as well. And the reason for that is perhaps you don't want here allow to change that. Like here we say, okay, we use the argument, we don't allow to change them, the values, but there are still many things what I want to do with this class. So how I can use that? The way is you are creating all your functions, or let's say most of your functions, almost all of your functions with const, which are not changing values here. All right, that's the way. For example, here we make here just a call. Perhaps you want make here another call, which is printing out this house number, or which is doing anything else and then doing something else. And you have to create many const functions, and that's why you will see that many functions have const versions. And the reason why they have so many const versions is one reason, let's say so, is because they use it in this calls, this to avoid this copying and changing and all this kind of stuff. There is one more thing to consider, and it's a good thing. And of course, like I showed you before, this is only important for this one, but of course you can use a normal variable has access to const and non-const. So if I would make this one const as well, let's make this one const as well, just for this purpose here, const. Of course, I'm not allowed to change here. Here I try to change. Let's delete this one because now both are const. You can see this Maggie's house here is a non-const. I still can access both, and that's very nice. So you don't care about, if you make a normal variable, you don't care if it's const or non-const. You can access them. The only difference is you can't change with them anything. And you can see here when you hover your mouse over this function, here's the signature. Signature means just how the declaration is. And you can see, we see here this const word, right? And when you should all time hover your mouse over it and see, okay, they use here this const word, which means I can just use it, but I can't change anything. All right, which means I use this one, and that's it. Okay, I talked here a lot, and let's make a fast recap what you should know. You should only know one rule, and the rule is, as a beginner, if you see a const variable, for example, where I deleted this one, let's make this a const variable. It means you have only access now to const functions in the class. That's the rule. But if you see a normal variable, for example, without a const, this is a normal variable, it has access to all functions in a class, which means in a const function, as well in a non-const function, which can change variables. This is so for the starter, I think, a good start point. Later you will learn much more, and of course read in C++ books and in online documentations a little bit more about this, and train this, because this, like I said, you will see this kind of structure almost all time, and this is, yeah, this is the const function here. I think I talked here enough. And with that said, if you have any questions or any complaints like all time, write it in the comments. And see you in the next. Bye. And like all time, good luck and never give up.